All right, what's good? This isn't the inaugural episode of the podcast. This kind of the pre-podcast until I can get into the studio next month. But we're gonna jump straight into it. So I'm gonna talk about a little bit of the goings on the gaming side of the internet. So the first and foremost thing that caught my attention a couple days ago or so is essentially what we're seeing here, right? It's basically criticizing Tekken. And this argument has been coming from two directions. One who they're both fed up with the game and fed up with the same thing, but for different reasons. So on one side, there's the just people who care about gameplay, right? They only care about combos, the actual game itself, and then there's another crowd that cares about the story and the other goings on along with the gameplay. But essentially, as you can see here, it says it's as if Tekken is slowly trying to become fantasy as Street Fighter lately. Tekken has always had fantasy like crazy hairstyles, bears, fighting demons, etc., but also this raw and more realistic feeling that, in my opinion, slowly starting to fade away in the newer. And I 100% agree. Now, I'm from the group. I never was part of the FGC. I was a fighting game fan. I was pretty good at the games, but first and foremost, I cared about the story. Whatever semblance of story there was, I really was a fan. Now, I used to read the booklet when I got the game just to find out some of the character backgrounds and motivations of what they're doing and why they fight like how they fight, who are their rivals and everything else. The stages added to that lore and the interactions between the character for me fuels how they play and influences who I pick as a character. And somehow along the way, the story just kind of went more into a generic bad anime direction. It really started around Tekken 6 when the story was just completely stupid. You had to play Tekken Force mode to actually get the story. It got even worse in Tekken 7, and now it's just off the rails in 8. Me personally, there's an argument where people were saying, oh well, Tekken always was over the top. They had dinosaurs and kangaroos and bears and uh wooden training dummies, which is true. But within context, uh there wasn't never like us ignoring this fact. It's just saying that it leaned more into it. I feel like Tekken is garbage these days. And me personally, I blame the over focus on what they think is the tournament scene. Now, stay with me. I'm attacking FGC, but if you feel that way, oh well, come see me. I'll beat your ass. But anyway, this is my problem, right? So around, I would say the crossover from Tekken. Before we even get to that, the tone. Tekken 1 for me felt like a prototype, right? It felt like if someone took Virtua Fighter 1 and 2 and said, what if we could do more? What if we could not be as technical or super complex and add a little bit of fantasy to it? Because at that time when the first Tekken came out, all the 3D fighters were, at least from Japan, were going off of Virtua Fighter. That was the inspiration. Early Dead or Alive, early Tekken, even to a certain extent, early Bloody Roar. All of those 3D fighters can base or track their inspiration to the first couple of Virtua Fighters. Around Tekken 2, I think is when they started to hit the swing of things. They started to kind of carve out their own niche. The story was getting a little bit more dark. Look at the intro. I think that's my favorite Tekken intro. The characters have more of a story. This is the first fighting game that I could think of that had a main character, or a character who was the main character was kind of an anti-hero and then boil over to an outright villain by the time the game was over. He was devil, and people took Kazuya being able to turn into a devil and angel and all of that stuff and being like, see, it's always been XYZ. That character's based off of Devil Man, right? So we're not gonna go there. But around Tekken 3, it started, the tone was more serious. It wasn't so campy, it wasn't so anime. Now, mind you, they always had their joke and silly endings for different characters, but for the most part, the tone, the music, the stages, the characters, the way they're designed was more of a cool, grounded, somewhat fantasy fighting game, but it didn't lean too far into fantasy. It was like just enough to give it its distinct mark, but at the same time, it wasn't too far that we got now, because the shit now is garbage, in my opinion. Um, that being said, Tekken 4 to me is the pinnacle of the series. It's the most experimental. The music is the best. The characters all feel the best. Just the art style was dope. Tekken 5, the argument that people had was that the uneven stages and blah blah blah. I felt like if people let Namco keep building from Tekken 4 and actually work out the kinks, we would have had one of the best games of all time, fighting wise. Because at this time, 2D Fighters was dead. Nobody cared about a 2D fighter. Street Fighter wasn't hitting. Guilty Gear was in its own little lane. King of Fighters was still doing his thing, but even they was venturing into 3D trying to catch the trend. But at the end of the day, it was Tekken up here and Dead or Alive on the other hand, and they was clashing because once you got Dead or Alive and saw that you could kick a nigga, because like first they had the first Dead or Alive, right? And they had this on the stages, they had these spots on the stage called danger zones, where if you hit a person on a danger zone, they get hit up in the air and they get extra damage, right? That's something that a lot of fighters were trying to do to differentiate, whatever, try to make themselves different from Virtua Fighter and the other copycats or games that were inspired from Virtua Fighter. Like Virtua Fighter had the ring outs, and you know, Dead or Alive wanted to still keep that stage hazard, all of that going on, and they added the danger zone. But by Dead or Alive 2 and 3, especially Dead or Alive, 2 hardcore, you could kick a nigga off of a building, off a cliff. Like, we never seen that. The most we ever seen from that was Mortal Kombat, when you can uppercut somebody to the next stage. They took that to the next level. And the creator of Dead or Alive would talk about how bad Tekken of a series was, right? I remember he had a list of his top 5 worst games, and all of them was Tekken. Tekken 1, Tekken 2, Tekken 3, Tekken 4, Tekken 5. They all garbage. So that back and forth, on top of the fact, after a while, Dead or Alive became an Xbox exclusive. And that fueled the console war, because it was like, okay, PlayStation 2 is the top dog. It's got the best games, but here's Xbox. People who own an Xbox and people who were arguing for the Xbox, better graphics, this, that, and the third. Look at our fighting game, right? Like, Microsoft came out the gate swinging. They said they was going to get a fighting game. They got Dead or Alive. We're going to make our own racing game to rival Gran Turismo. Before Forza, it was Project Gotham Racing. That was one of the things that they had on there. And then Halo was above everything else. Sony had no answer, but they were trying to combat everything that Sony had at the time. So Dead or Alive and Tekken was right here, button heads. So you could imagine that when they went to the drawing board to make Tekken 4, they was like, you know what? We got to do something different, because this is the only Tekken game up to this point that you can hit somebody against the wall and some of the material will come off. Like I said before, the stages were uneven. Now, Virtua Fighter, I think 2 or 3 did that before. But again, at this time, I'm going to talk about Virtua Fighter later. But at this time, Tekken and Dead or Alive is right here. So I felt like if they were allowed, instead of people constantly complaining, and this was mostly from the tournament side, right? The person who sat on the couch didn't complain and didn't have the outlet to complain anyway. But I feel like the tournament side shouldn't have had as much of an influence on the development side, because this is the problem with video games in general. Everybody plays video games like they're in a tournament. They're looking for the meta. They're looking for the broken stuff in the game that they can use to win. And whenever you play to look to exploit the game, it's never going to be fun, and you're going to break it quicker. So them complaining about the uneven stages, yeah, you can pick an OP character, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, let them cook. All right, we made some mistakes on the first or this iteration of Tekken. We're going to go back, change some of the things in the uneven stages, make it more transitional. No, they got so scared they went back to Tekken 5, and they went back to the old school open stages. Around this time, Tekken 5 started to go a little left, but it was still cool. They had Jinpachi, which in the long run, for me, which is why I don't like Tekken anymore, because the story is just went off the rails. I don't understand what is it about fighting games when it comes to, they have such dope lore and they touch on it, but whenever they get the opportunity to actually expand upon it or make a story behind it, the first thing they do is be some of the worst writing that you could ever see ever. And it'd be like, Sorry about that. But like I was saying, like that's one of the things that made me mad about the series is because it took a turn for the left, right? The individual characters and their motivations went out the window. Paul and Kazuya no longer have a rivalry. I don't even know if they acknowledge each other anymore. Pardon me. I don't even know if they acknowledge each other anymore. It's more Paul and Kuma, and then it's become like this whole comedy skit between them. Steve and Nina. Nina is he's a clone or a test tube baby from her. Do they care anymore? Who knows? Like so many characters lost their plot motivations or just kind of stopped in the middle of whatever their character arc was to focus on Jin versus Kazuya. Hihachi's dead, he's come back. Now he's a sympathetic character in Tekken 7. Now, oh, it wasn't Jinpachi who had the devil gene. He wasn't the origin. The mom. Oh, and the mom somehow met Akuma from Street Fighter. It just was all stupid. And this last iteration has just become super over the top. Now they got meters and super moves. And I personally, as someone who loved fighting games growing up, like this whole homogenized consolidation of fighting games has taken away the uniqueness of it all. So that was the argument on here. And that leads to my next topic, which is Virtual Fighter. So a lot of people were saying, right, well, if you're fed up with Tekken and the way it plays, there's a new Virtual Fighter coming out. Here's the problem with Virtual Fighter, right? Virtual Fighter is the OG. Virtual Fighter is the first and the top dog. If you ask any of the 3D fighting game developers, they hold Virtual Fighter up here. The problem is two things. Number one, it is extremely technical and it's not casual friendly. That's why so many people went to Tekken and went to Dead or Alive. Two, no story whatsoever that you can pick up. The dude on the front of the cover, Akira, don't even win the tournaments. Kage the Ninja wins the tournaments. They don't even have their story on the forefront. They don't. And I'm not saying everything has to be about story, but if you're going to be so bare bones about it, you might as well just be playing with wireframes instead of actually having character motivations and themes and personality to these characters, right? You might as well just go and not have anything at all. So people were saying, well, if you're tired of what Tekken has become, play a more grounded fighting game like Virtual Fighter. But if you can see up here, under those health bars, those look to be some type of meter. Now, this is my problem with fighting games. Everybody plays or tries to incorporate Street Fighter. Now, my issue is, ever since Street Fighter 4 came out, they got the credit of revitalizing the fighting game. And that's not true. Street Fighter fell off because Capcom couldn't transition into 3D or the hardcore fans wouldn't let them. Street Fighter EX was a great series that people never gave a chance. Rival Schools, for whatever reason, didn't take off. What was the other game with my dude from Marvel vs. Capcom 2 with the Star Gladiator never took off. And so they were kind of stuck in this lull of, they decided to be like, okay, we're gonna make Street Fighter 3 and make the best animated 2D sprites at that time, and it didn't sell. But during the time that Capcom fell off, Mortal Kombat transitioned to 3D well and sold millions. Tekken was selling millions. Dead or Alive was selling millions. If you count Def Jam as a fighting game, that sold millions and is beloved. Virtual Fighter, it was successful, but because the Dreamcast fell off and Sega went out of business in the console market, I kind of give them a pass because they transitioned to PlayStation 2 and went multi-platform, but I digress. The point of it is, fighting games were still prominent. They weren't maybe the best thing in the world because the arcade scene was dead, right? There's no more arcades. You can't go into an arcade outside of it being like a bar retro arcade combination. Going to the arcade is no longer a thing, right? It's not big anymore, at least not in the United States. So that popularity died down. And they attributed that because Street Fighter fell off. Street Fighter fell off because Capcom fell off with fighting games. When they came back in Street Fighter 4 and they had the super combo, ultra combo, whatever, EX meters, every fighting game looked at that and said, we need to do the same thing. And it's been downhill ever since. I don't want to play Dead or Alive with super super moves and EX moves and meter. I don't want to play Tekken with super moves and EX and meter. I don't want to play Mortal Kombat with super moves and EX. But now it seems like fighting games have to have meter and super moves and EX moves. Why can't anybody just be unique and do their own thing instead of having to be this all universal play style, and then we can maybe branch out but not too far? And that's only because they want as many tournament players as possible to be able to take their skill set in one game and transition to the next. They want that constant visibility. And me personally, I would like it more if developers actually experimented and tried something new. But of course, one of the people on Twitter who I was going back and forth with, not arguing, just talking to, was basically like, and I agree. It takes money to experiment, because if it don't work, now you ain't never getting this game or sequel. You can throw that out the window. So they gotta do what's um what's working, but it's killing the market at this point, because I don't want to play that. If y'all look at the trailer for Clive from Final Fantasy 16 and the Tekken trailer, it looks ridiculous. That don't look like Tekken. It barely look like Soul Calibur. Now, if we had a fighting game, 3D fighting game that played like that, cool. But there's no uniqueness anymore. There's no variety in fighting games. Every game has the basic super meter, EX meter. We're gonna do this, and this is like it's made for an audience that they think exists instead of just making cool those stuff. So yeah, man, that's what was going on. People were complaining about Tekken, and there was a lot of back and forth. And I agree with it. Both audiences need to talk to each other because they're both on the same page. They're just on different sides of it. But if they actually talk to each other, they can come up with the solution. The Game Awards was a couple days ago, and one of the things I could care less. I don't like the fact that they try to make this seem like this is the Oscars and all of that, the Grammys. I don't care about video games and the people who make them. I'm just not going to hold you. I don't care. I just want to see the new games, talk about the game, and keep it moving. But some of the new announcements, Ninjagate and Ragebound, this is sad. It's not sad because of the fact that it's a new game, but we haven't had a new 3D Ninja game in a long time. This is a 2D old school, like the Nintendo retro style. I'll pass. The main things that, all of these other games, I'm not even gonna hold you. The main things is an Onimusha remake. So I want to see if it's a remake of Onimusha 1, or is it a whole new retelling of whatever they're gonna do. But Onimusha was dope. I only ever played 3 though, and I had fun. It was a dope game. I remember being in the zoo and fighting those demon armadillo dudes that used to roll. It was tearing me up, but I beat it. But yeah, Onimusha was a dope game. I just hope it's not a Souls clone. I hate Souls clones. I really do. The second announcement was a game from the company that made Ico, Trico, and Shadow of the Colossus. I don't care about their games, man. But it's out. They're making one, and we'll see. The third game, the biggest announcement, I guess, was Okami 2. And look, this is my thing with Okami, right? I look at Okami like I look at a Psychonaut. 2 of these games franchises that the game reviewers and the small segment of people who played these games just sing these games praises. Ooh, they never were successful financially, but I feel like they keep getting a chance, keep trying to make it a thing because they feel like this was such a great game. People just didn't acknowledge. Yo, it don't matter if the game was the greatest game of all time. If people didn't play it, they didn't play it, bro. Quit putting it out, because they keep telling you each time, we don't care about this franchise as much as you care about this franchise. So when they said Okami 2 was coming out, I was like, so? I didn't care about the first one. But out of that announcement, Onimusha and Okami 2 is that Capcom have said that we're going to start reviving some of their dead franchises. A lot of people wanted Dino Crisis. They want a new Dino Crisis. I know there's a huge market or a huge crowd of people that want Breath of Fire. So there's a lot of Capcom, Beautiful Joe, a lot of Capcom games that people want to come back. And it's cool that they're exploring to try to bring some of these games back. So that's the only thing that really caught my eye at the Game Awards. But another thing is Astro Bot won the game of the year, right? Now, first and foremost, before I even get into that, like I was saying before, I don't care. There's so many game of the year awards given out by different publications, and I understand they want the game awards to be the game um game award show like the Grammys or the Oscars. I don't care. But basically, the Black Myth Wukong producer was upset that they didn't win Game of the Year. He was like, he wrote a speech, an accepted speech 2 years in advance. Like, who cares? Like, you're not the only one who made a video game, right? And I see a lot of people who were saying, "Oh, Black Myth Wukong, look at the graphics. The game is a generic Souls clone like all other ones." Astrobot was a very well developed and designed platforming game. And that's the thing that a lot of gamers these days don't realize. And I don't blame them because of the fact that the industry is so, there's not a lot of variety anymore. But when I was growing up, games were just games. You had platformers that were AAA platformers and people would care about, AAA fighting games, racing games, arcade games. Like, all of those were big deals. So to see a platformer still be very well made, it's still a video game. I'm of the belief, right? 2K11, Michael Jordan on the front, when that came out, that was the best sports game and one of the best sports games of all time. That also should have been nominated for best game of the year because it's still a video game. So the fact that people are upset and kind of like shocked that Astrobot won just shows how far removed we are from video games, to the point where we only expect these cookie cutter, and I'm not saying Black Myth Wukong was cookie cutter, but these AAA or super graphical intensive, because Astrobot is just as gorgeous graphically, right? But people are just so upset that that game didn't win, and they still can't come to the mind that platformers are still, if done right, can be game of the year opportunities. They're not just for kids. People write off platformers and say they're for kids. They write off Mario. The barrier of to entry is lower, but that doesn't mean that it's an easy baby game. I beat the whole game. I beat everything. I got all the bots. Um, Game got hard at points. So it's not that it's a easy game or a baby game. It's just a good video game. Just like that card game got nominated. I don't like card games, but if it was a good ass card game, put it in the category. And if it wins, it wins, you know? So the fact that he's crying that, like, you have this assumption or expectation that I understand you think you should win, cool. But this assumption or this entitlement that you were just should be handed the victory, because, and then people was so involved in the culture war, and I'm gonna get into that in a minute later on in the podcast, but people were so entrenched in the culture war, that they backed Stellar Blade, which was weak, it's a mediocre game, and this is a mediocre Souls clone game. But because it went outside the norm, they galvanized behind it. So they put a lot of extra sauce on it when it didn't need to be. I played the trial. It's another Souls type game. We got so many. I hyped this game up beyond belief, and it's not, in my opinion, a game of the year. So that's what kind of came out of all the game of the year stuff. The big news was a report that Microsoft came out and said that Xbox console game exclusives will be the exception moving forward. Essentially, they're going to be putting some of their exclusive games on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch. Now, that from a business standpoint, because they want Game Pass everywhere. They want it to be the Netflix of gaming. And I was telling somebody this years ago that this was what Microsoft wanted to do, and they just couldn't fathom. They want Game Pass on your phone. They want it on your computer. They want it on your TV. They want it on your tablet. They want it on your Switch and your PlayStation if Sony and Nintendo will let them, which I doubt. They want it on your Roku, your Amazon Fire Stick. If it has enough juice to run it and you have an internet connection, they want those subscriptions. That's what they care about. They don't care about a dedicated console. So business-wise, this makes sense. From a consumer standpoint, what is my motivation at this point now to buy an Xbox console? You know what I'm saying? Because if I can get, like, the whole concept of having a dedicated console, number one, is to avoid having to build a PC. It's easy, but some people don't want to do it, or there's just never going to be this transition from buying the parts and upgrading every 4 years, whatever. So that's one. Two, to get a dedicated game console, the incentive to buy is the games that you get on this console. Not only are gonna push the graphics on this console, but you can only get these games here, right? Yeah, Sony has started to put some of its games to be on PC, but if you don't have a PC, you just got a Switch or you just got an Xbox or you're looking to get a game system, you can't play Spider-Man. You can't play The Last of Us or God of War or some of those other PlayStation exclusives. So the fact now that they're saying games like the only games Xbox had at this point was Halo, Gears of War, and Forza. These are the three franchises that they have left. And now that they're saying, oh, yeah, we're gonna put that on PS5 eventually. I just seen the Outer Worlds trailer at the Game Awards, Outer Worlds 2, and it says it's gonna be on PS5 as well. The only incentive to kind of stay in their ecosystem is that it's gonna be on Game Pass. So if you pay for Game Pass, you're not necessarily gonna have to pay $79.99 or $69.99 for the new game. You're paying the subscription service and you already got it. So that might be the incentive. But if it's on my TV and my computer and on my Fire Stick and my phone, what is the incentive to go out and pay $500-$600 for a dedicated console at this point if you can stream it? So I think that if I am an Xbox customer, I think they're going to take a hit early on and hope that the investment into Game Pass is going to pay off. And it might, who knows? But right now, the incentive to buy an Xbox branded console, I just don't see it no more. Unless you just want to kind of play Xbox One, original Xbox games, because it can do backwards compatibility. That's one thing I got to get an Xbox for, is you can play old Xbox and Xbox 360 games. And for some of those games on Xbox 360, the servers are back up. So if you like some of them games back in the day, you can still hop online. I know when they did the backwards compatibility, people booted up Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops, and they were still online. So yeah, but this is just like, damn, this is kind of an end of an era, like the console war era. Because I remember when the Xbox came into the marketplace, Sony was dominating for 2 generations straight, right? PS1 and PS2. Sega kind of dropped out the race. Nintendo was falling over itself. It couldn't really surpass the PlayStation 1. Nintendo 64 was like only had like 5 good games on there. GameCube was lagging behind. No online, no DVD compatibility. Just kind of again, it was only a handful of Nintendo exclusives that were worth a damn. So when the 360 era came out, well, before that, when Xbox first came out, they smacked everybody in the head with Halo. Now, PC has had its fair share of first person shooters, but on the console, Halo was incredible. Halo 2 blew everybody out the water, to where Sony, even into the PS4, was still looking for a first person shooter to compete with Halo, right? And they had Xbox Live. I know Sega Saturn might have had it. I think the original Sega back in the day, and then Sega Dreamcast for sure had online compatibility, and of course the PC had online compatibility. But Xbox was the first person to popularize it on the console and make it seem so seamless. It was integrated in. You had the Xbox Marketplace. It changed the way video game consoles were made. Right? You had to have a working online infrastructure. That's one of the things that was a knock on Sony early on. The online infrastructure was lacking because the PS3 was so expensive. You had to tell people, okay, I got to wait for the exclusive games because it's taking a while, but I'm going to take the hit as an investment, right? But then you need to tell me that I don't get the online infrastructure. I don't get cross-game party chat. My console isn't packed in with the headset or any type of social tools to work online. Sony had to play catch up. The only thing they could do at the time was offer PSN for free, which now they adopted the subscription service like Microsoft. So Microsoft definitely introduced a new thing in gaming, but as time went on, they never kind of got off the ground when it comes to first party exclusives, right? You know, Halo and them buying Rare didn't really work out, but like Halo and Xbox Live took Microsoft a long ways. Project Gotham and then Forza took them a long way, and their graphical ability, like, it was head and shoulders above the PlayStation 2. So that was something to kind of expect moving forward to hold on to. 360 came out, smacked Sony in the mouth early on, right? They off the bat got a ton of third-party exclusive, former PlayStation third-party exclusives, and then they announced that the DLC from Grand Theft Auto was going to be exclusive to Xbox 360, and you were going to be able to play Grand Theft Auto day and date with the PlayStation, because before Grand Theft Auto was a timed exclusive on PlayStation 2. You would get Grand Theft Auto 3, San Andreas, and Vice City, especially San Andreas, months up to a year before you can get it on the Xbox. Microsoft was like, squash all that. We getting Devil May Cry, we getting Resident Evil, we getting 2 exclusive Capcom games, we getting 2 exclusive JRPGs from the creator of Final Fantasy. We're getting, we getting Tekken. Like, they were throwing money at the third party exclusives on Sony to where it made them look like they were scrambling. Final Fantasy came to Xbox became multi-plat. So yeah, but as time went on, Sony played catch up because they played the long game. They had that investment of those first party studios. So you started to see the Uncharted, the Gran Turismos, the God of Wars, the Infamouses, all of those games kind of carried Sony, where after everything started to fizzle out, all Microsoft had was Halo and Gears of War and Forza. And it would have been cool if Call of Duty didn't come out. Call of Duty came out and changed the game. Call of Duty, to this day, you play a first-person shooter with Call of Duty controls. The 2 back buttons is aiming and shoot. That's it. It was to the fact that the criticism of the PlayStation 3 controller, because the triggers weren't long enough and the controller wasn't big enough just to play Call of Duty. And Halo just couldn't compete with Call of Duty. Over the years, it stumbled. They haven't really figured out what they want to do with the franchise. So at this point, Halo isn't the draw that it once was. Gears of War is kind of long in the tooth. It's overstayed its welcome. They don't kind of know what they want to do. And Forza is Forza. You know what I'm saying? You want to play a racing game? Cool. But at this point, what exclusive Xbox games are out or announced that would incentivize you to buy an Xbox console? So the fact that they're saying they're going to be on PS5, that's it. The last thing I want to kind of talk about, pardon me, is this. Intergalactic. Now, this was the last game that they announced at the game. This is from Naughty Dog. It's not Uncharted, not Crash Bandicoot, it's not Jak and Daxter, it's not Tattoo Assassins. I think that was the game that they made a long time ago. Whatever that janky fighter game they came out with, but they don't talk about. It's not The Last of Us. It's not none of that. It's a brand new IP that they've been working on. It's like a space cyberpunk setting that is inspired by Cowboy Bebop and a bunch of other Akira, a bunch of other properties, right? People online have lost their minds because it is a bald woman. They don't know nothing about the game other than what she looked like, and then the quick little synopsis, and everybody lost this game. Whoa, oh, she's unattractive. First of all, grow up. I've never been attracted to a video game, even when I was a kid. But at this point, man, if you're complaining that a game character isn't attractive, something's wrong with you. Something is extremely wrong with you, to the point where you need to go see the doctor, see the lady, do something, because that's ridiculous. And then people are upset because it's a woman again. And it's like, this game is once again polarizing people for no reason other than it's a woman and she's bald, and all of these crybabies on the internet are crying. And it's like, these people are so annoying because they think they're the only people that buy video games. You're not. There's a multitude of people who buy video games. You are a small, loud minority on the internet following behind grifters who complain about everything that isn't a straight white man in a video game, which, out of all the announcements you've seen, 90% of the main characters in these games are straight white men. Ain't no niggas. You know what I'm saying? So you don't see me complaining. I've been playing as a white dude in video games for 20 plus something years. So the fact that something changes, all of a sudden people getting mad about it, they think that because they complain and whine about a game, they're the target on it. It's this entitlement and constant whining and complaining to where they think devs should just cater to them. If you want a game that is catered to you 100%, learn how to make a video game and put it out, and I guarantee you it'll flop. because you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know how to make a game. And the games that do flop don't flop because they have diverse characters. They flop because they're mediocre or trash. Concord was going to be garbage. Like, I've seen a lot of people, haven't they learned since Concord? Concord flop. I played the beta. It was mediocre. I'm not gonna say garbage. It just was just a game. I wouldn't pay for it, and I wouldn't buy a download if it was free. I played the beta just for something to do and have a new game. But I quickly came to realize it's like, this is it. It's not enough anything. It wasn't enough. The stages and the game modes were mediocre. The characters were mediocre. The abilities were mediocre. Nobody had ultimates, and then at this point, nobody wants to play hero shooters anymore. It's years too late. I understand they invested so much money, but that's Sony's fault for mismanaging the money and misreading the audience at this point when it comes to hero shooting. You could say Marvel rivals, but Marvel is a big property. Who doesn't like Spider-Man and Wolverine and Captain America? But a hero shooter now, just a fresh IP, not based on nothing, you will be hard pressed to succeed in this climate right? So yeah, they're trying to compare that. This game ain't even came out. I seen one person was like, they're imposing their agenda. What agenda? You don't even know what's going on in the game. It's a bounty hunter. So yeah, man. I'm so sick of these people always whining and complaining about shit all the fucking time. Go outside, man. Damn. But yeah, this was just a it's probably like an hour and some change, but this was just like a pre-podcast, right? So I have another podcast coming for you tomorrow, or whenever this drops. I have a second one, which is not game focused. It's more pop culture, sports, and just common conversation up until re-release on next month sometime, and then it'll be the big studio, big production. But I'm still using this old setup. If you're watching this on YouTube or wherever else, yeah, follow me on TikTok, Y2KAM. If you're listening to this on Spotify, go ahead and follow those. TikTok Y2KAM513, YouTube Y2KAM513, Twitch Y2KAM513. Well, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace.